those of you who don't know me, which I think is basically no one at this point, I'm John Phillips, CEO of Philcom Global. Our PR firm focuses on emerging industries and technology. We have the pleasure of working with Advanced Glazings and Better Buildings for Humans. As I mentioned earlier, this is our fourth and final segment in the inaugural War on Dull Buildings Summit, or WODBS for short, as we affectionately call it. Just a reminder that WODBS is a co-production effort between AGL, Glazing Innovation Leaders and Makers of Solera and SoleraWall, world famous, come on, need no introduction, and the Better Buildings for Humans podcast and community that we're humbly very proud of, also produced by AGL, which of course explores the vital connection between the built environment and the human experience. Just a quick reminder for our panelists today that we only have an hour, just like all of these short and sweet sessions. So, be thorough, but be mindful that we got 4 or 5 prepared bullets that we want to circulate across the whole panel. Hear from everybody as much as possible. So that's really it. I'm proud to introduce Joe Menchevsky, our esteemed host of the Better Buildings for Humans podcast and senior corporate sales manager at AGL, as well as Terry McGilvery, product manager for SoleraWall and senior architectural product consultant at AGL. These gentlemen are going to lead our last session here, which of course you don't need me to tell you, is the human element integrating wellness into metal building design. So with that being said, thank you so much, panelists and attendees. I will hand it over to Joe and Terry and look forward to a final engaging discussion here at our summit.
All right. Well, thank
Thanks,
you very
John.
much, John. Much appreciated. I certainly love being esteemed. I'm going to make sure my wife knows tonight that I was introduced as being esteemed. She'll be thrilled.
At least you weren't called senior like Terry was.
He was senior.
I think I was senior as well.
Senior esteemed, yeah.
Let's kick off in 2 ways. First of all, I probably should ask the panelists to introduce themselves and give a little bit of their background. Let's start with Tony Bouquot. Tony, tell us what you do.
Sure. I am Tony Bouquot. I am the general manager for the Metal Building Manufacturers Association, MBMA. We are a trade association that represents the U.S. metal building industry. I have about currently 38 manufacturer members who make buildings and another 72 members who supply goods and services to the industry.
All right,
thank you. Thank you for having me.
A pleasure. Terry McGilvery, tell us who you are.
Well, I've been with Advanced Glazing for over 7 years now. I came in to help develop the SoleraWall product, which is our Solera translucent offering in a panelized system, and helped move ahead the R&D on that, marketing, and also get on the business development stuff. So that's got some good traction. But also with Joe and I started doing a lot of business development, essentially figuring out where Solera can fit in the world, aside from the traditional avenues that we have been successful in pursuing, which led to the metal building world, and kind of to where we are now, to understand how daylighting, that's what the stuff we do, how daylighting affects everyone. And it's our mandate to help make beautiful buildings for people, as Joe said in his podcast, Better Buildings for Humans, because people spend a lot of time in these buildings. So a business development to try to get see where we can grow the business, get more daylight into buildings going forward.
Wonderful. And how about Steve Lilly? Why don't you take a moment and tell us who you are, Steve?
Sure. Steve Lilly. I'm co-founder of both ProtoCase and 45 Drives. The first being advanced manufacturer of some metal parts, some machine parts, sheet metal parts for science and engineering, with a strong emphasis on aerospace and defense. We focus on the work no one else wants, the low volumes, the prototype runs, the one-ofs. So it's been for an interesting model, and it's a business that's grown well over its 20-year history. 45 Drives was a spin-off from ProtoCase, believe it or not, because it's very different. We design and manufacture some of the world's highest density open source data storage servers. I I believe my involvement here today is because between those two businesses, we own 4 buildings, 3 of which are built of insulated metal panels. One's half insulated metal panels. It was an addition, and 2 of those buildings are naturally daylit with Advanced Glazing SoleraWall product.
That is exactly why you're here. Absolutely. Okay, let's start the same way we started session 2. Tony, I'm going to call on you right out of the gate to make sure that everybody who's listening understands what a metal building is.
Sure. Metal building system is a very specific type of steel construction. It is a low-rise, non-residential building that takes advantage of what we call precision engineered steel components. They depend on where you're at. Some people call it 3-plate, some people call it build-up, but it's basically the main framing members are welded together into an I shape, taking 3 individual components, a web and 2 flanges, and welding those together. And by doing that on a job by job basis, you're able to make a much more efficient use of the steel in the building. It's often referred to in the States as pre-engineered metal buildings, PEMBs. We don't really favor that term. We call them metal building systems. And then on your side of the border, typically called sheet steel buildings.
I did a little research recently, and I believe this number is correct. It's 70% of all construction taking place in North America now is actually metal buildings. Tony, why do you think it's grown so much, and why do you think it's so dominant now?
I don't know where you got that number. That's considerably higher than
Is
our
it?
numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
So within the segment that we cover, which is the low-rise non-residential,
Yeah.
we are typically around a third of that, which
Okay.
we are the biggest in that segment. The next biggest would be tilt wall concrete. But we're not 70%. I'd love to be there, but no, there's a lot of competitors in this space, from tilt wall concrete to post and frame, wood construction to conventional steel.
Still very large. So thank you for the correction, first of all, and I apologize for the incorrect number, but it's still very consequential. And tell us about why you think the industry has grown so much and is so prevalent now.
We talked about this a little bit yesterday, but metal buildings are typically the least expensive way to enclose the maximum amount of square footage. So starting from that point, and then taking that from if all you're interested in is doing it as cheaply as possible, we can do that, and we do a lot of those buildings. If you're interested in enclosing space inexpensively and then using your money for other elements of the building, like the human experience in the building, then it's a good option for that as well, because you're not spending your money on the structure, you're spending it on the things that count more to the inhabitants, the long-term inhabitants of that building.
Right. So the higher end of the metal building industry, which will probably be our focus today, is the end where humans are occupying the buildings continuously. So it's different. When you have humans in, you have to design with human wellness in mind. You have to design with human productivity in mind. And so that's what a lot of this discussion's about. I'd like to go into that by calling on Steve again. As he'd mentioned, he's got several metal buildings, and he's doing some unusual things in order to create a better environment that promotes wellness and productivity, reduces turnover, reduces absenteeism, all those sorts of things. Steve, tell us a little bit about the things you did with, say 45 drives, and also the expansion at ProtoCase to create human-centric buildings.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Joe. So we've got a pretty intense value statement in our business, and our culture is very much oriented around our people. But we demand a lot of our people, but in return, we try to make sure our staff are treated extremely well and very much appreciate what we do for them. For instance, we have some very extensive programs around how we provide leadership training, we provide communication training, we encourage our staff, we demand of our staff that they deal with conflicts in a very specific way. I think it spoke a little bit about this yesterday, as even though I wasn't a panelist. It is very important for us that every employee who has an issue or has a conflict, and a conflict can emerge itself in so many ways, but it's when you have some form of issue with a coworker or a boss or whatever it may be. And it's very important to us to make sure that those issues are dealt with before a staff member goes home and takes it home to family and friends. That's not healthy. It's very unhealthy, in fact. We provide a lot of basic health services. We provide an on-site psychologist. We have many of our staff members do not have a family doctor, so we provide a family doctor in terms of a clinic that happens once every couple of weeks. So some would ask, well, you do so much for your staff, and yes, we ask so much in return for them, but why is it you would then go and decide you're going to build a dull metal building and house your people inside a facility such as that? And so what we've done is we've taken a whole different approach, and we've addressed certain pieces of that internal environment that makes it that makes a metal building very conducive to a great workplace. For instance, we manage CO2 levels in all of our buildings. So we monitor the CO2 levels in every building. We provide, make-up ventilation to ensure that those CO2 levels don't get to a point where we're causing our staff to get drowsy, fall asleep, lose creativity, become less productive, less effective, and less efficient. The other thing that we've done is we've incorporated naturally daylighted material, i.e. SoleraWall, into 2 of the buildings. So first of all, it's one thing to go from a building that has no human beings into it, but we've graduated to, a manufacturing environment, which is our ProtoCase manufacturing center, where we have, the building is enveloped with SoleraWall, and just provides this absolutely beautiful environment inside. In fact, this picture, I think the lights might be on, but normally they would not be under this environment. But this is as you can see, the SoleraWall surrounding the top section of the building. The rest of the building is built from insulated metal panels, and just provides an absolutely beautiful environment for our staff. And there's a great shot of the building from the outside. That doesn't look like your standard dull metal building. It looks something more incredible than that. Actually, that building was 45 drives, and maybe if we can go have a look at that. What we've done in terms of office spaces, we've provided this environment from what would traditionally be a pretty dull metal building, and just by enveloping the building with natural daylighting material, we create just an absolutely beautiful space. And it really is, we talked a little bit in the earlier session about dwell time in retail, and how it's important to try to get customers to come in and spend that extra few minutes in looking at the shiny apples or whatever it may be in a grocery store. Well, dwell time can be looked at from the perspective of your staff too. I mean, we want our staff to come to work to feel happy to come to work. When they get inside the environment, feel good about where they are, and encourage them to not be so anxious to go home, because when people just want to leave work and go home, they stop working for the last hour of the day. They're starting to think about what they're making for dinner or what they're going to do in the evening or whatever it may be. Create these environments where people enjoy being there. They stay attuned to their creativity, to their productivity, and what have you. And that's what we've been able to do with these metal buildings, and just transform them into really beautiful spaces. And it's worked extremely well for us.
Thank you for that, Steve. Terry, you were involved, I believe, both with the design and construction of those buildings. Tell us what it's like. First of all, that image we saw there of the old building and the expansion into the new building, that's with ProtoCase. Terry, tell us what it feels like to be in the old section of the building versus in the new section of the building.
Oh, well, I'm smiling because we have a thing. We've taken lots of architects, designers, owners, taken it from the original building that ProtoCase has, And it's a butler building. Nothing wrong with that. There's some artificial lighting, but actually there's some punched openings there with Solera in there. So you walk through there, the lights are on. I said, typical manufacturing building, metal building. Nothing wrong with this, right? Nothing right. So we're right about where I took this picture. And then we start walking towards the addition, and people said, "Oh, what's over there?" I said, "Yeah, we'll get there in a minute, but this is fine, right? You're okay with that?" And then just where the people are standing there in that image, you take those 10 steps and you walk into that area, and they're like, "Oh, wow, this feels nice." And it does. Psychologically, it changes you how you feel, and it's just natural light. But that's what natural light does. It makes you feel better, makes you less aggressive, all the other things psychologically, physiologically, everything. Uh, and that's what happens in that space. And Steve talked about the lights not being on there. And one of the testimonials we had of part of our marketing, someone went to turn the lights off, and then realized the lights weren't on that day. They weren't on, like, didn't need them. Actually, the lights that Steve has in that building, they're on a sensor. So as it gets darker, they come on as needed too. So it's really cool. And it's a basic building. See, if you could talk about it, it's nothing fancy with that building. But we didn't do anything fancy with it. We added some daylighting to it. Painted the roof deck for reflectivity, but that's all they did. And it creates a really nice space. 45 Drives is even a bit of a notch higher on that because more people are in that space, but it's not rocket science what we're doing. We're doing daylighting, but it's not exotic stuff that we're doing to make a beautiful space.
Yeah, and to Tony's point, I mean, it's very cost effective to put a building up like that, and with the integration of the SoleraWall, which just interlocks with the insulated metal panels, it's such an easy build, and it really is a cost effective build to get that result as well. It's just amazing.
Right on. Okay, so let's talk about daylight. Terry talked about daylight a little bit. I work in this world. I read much of the research that's happening, and from the research perspective, it is a dramatic improvement in human health, human productivity, to have full spectrum natural light in a space as opposed to partial spectrum natural light that comes with artificial lighting sources. I'll come back to you on this one, Tony. How much does the industry know about the many health benefits, productivity benefits, retail sales benefits associated with full spectrum light?
So, we touched on this yesterday. I went back and took a look at, we have a series of architectural education resources that MBMA's put together. We call them our Folio series. We have 10 titles, and we're continuing to add to them. And each one takes a deep dive into a specific metal building of interest and talks to the design team and talks to the folks who own the building and inhabit the building. So I took a look in there to see, anything that might be pertinent to that discussion to that point. If I may, let me share. So the one I want to share here, can you all see the St. David's Performance Center?
Yep.
Yep. So this is down in Austin, Texas. It's the home and the training grounds for Austin FC, who are a Major League Soccer team. And it's actually a series of metal buildings that were put up by one of our members. And so if I scroll down here, you can see they're basically these metal buildings sit side by side. So the eave of one building connects to the eave of the next building. You can see these large overhangs on the front, which is designed, as you can see when you get into the areas with the windows. They're designed so that you can get lots of daylighting in, but you also have some shading there, so you're not getting blasted. But you can also see how it's designed to kind of combine indoor and outdoor space. But going down a little bit further into the text here, this point up here on the left side where it talks about, this is from the architect, but creating a culture of well-being by addressing how design can enrich the body and mind. The center features clerestory and floor-to-ceiling windows that draw natural light deep into the building interiors. Access to natural light has been shown to have a positive impact on human health. I'm telling you guys stuff you already know. by boosting vitamin D levels, enhancing focus and productivity. So clearly, the folks who did the design on this building, that was an important element. The quote on the right that I have highlighted there is from the facilities manager. So these are the folks actually using the building, and he's talking about how the open concept of a metal building helps to enhance that team environment that's so important to us, a sports team. And you could replace sports team with business team, and it's the same idea, right? So I thought that was interesting. And to your question about how much is it considered, I can't say, Joe, that every project gives this much consideration to it, but certainly there are some who are designing with metal buildings who are doing so.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, that building is anything but a dull building. So hats off to the manufacturer of that.
This one I thought was interesting too, the workout room with the big overhead doors that on a nice day you just open up the entire wall, and the indoor space connects to the outdoor training space, and it's all one space. So
It's beautiful.
fantastic. Yeah, it is beautiful. I got to go a little deeper on the impact that daylight has on the employees. I'm a little closer to this than most people, so just because through the podcast I'm constantly talking to the researchers that are doing this work, and we're learning some like truly astounding things. I mean, first and foremost, we really need natural light in our lives. We absolutely need it. And we spend 90% of our time in buildings. And so we have to find ways to make sure people get exposed to natural light. I'll just give you a couple of examples, and they matter. One is somewhere around 480 nanometers, which is sort of a blue-green light. That is the light that is detected by our eye, not in a visual way, right? But in a way that tells our body approximately what time of day it is and whether we should be tired, and connect and ensures that our 24-hour clock is synced with the Earth's actual 24-hour clock. If we don't get that 480 nanometers at the right times of day, we will get out of sync and we will have sleeping issues. And if we have sleeping issues, health goes down, productivity goes down. It can be remarkable. There is even conversation within the WHO about whether or not shift work could be considered a cause of cancer, because your body wants to do, when you're sleeping, things happen. Your body chooses to do different things at different times of day, and it wants to do certain things at night when you're asleep. And if we get out of sync, those vital functions don't happen, or they happen at the wrong time, and it can be very, very detrimental. Let me throw something else at you. There's very recent research that shows that LED lights, while being incredibly efficient, much of that efficiency comes from cutting off a big chunk of the light spectrum. So when you get into the reds and even into the infrareds, they're not present with an LED light. And some of these higher wavelength reds and into the infrareds are when they're absent, it causes all kinds of health issues, including issues with blood sugar levels. And I can say this because um, NASA discovered this for people on the space shuttle, or sorry, on the ISS. Diabetes was occurring with these incredibly healthy astronauts, nobody more healthy. And that when they did the research and dug deeper into it, they realized that it was the absence of these higher wavelength reds and infrareds that was actually leading to problems with blood sugar. So we're just scratching the surface, but we're finding that, humans were designed to be underneath the sun. When we took it away, just in this last century, really, it's had a pretty profound impact on us. So if we want healthy, productive employees, or we want a store that we want people to stay in, we're going to have to give them that natural light for at least some portion of the time, some portion of the day. The LEDs just don't quite cut it. I mean, you hear the argument all the time now that, it's better to keep the dark box and use the LED lights because it's cheaper and it burns less energy. but then you've got a bunch of sick people in your store, right? Or in your building. So you have to have that natural light if you're going to keep the occupants healthy. That's a very long ramble, but I thought it was kind of important. Steve, do you see anything that could corroborate that, like compared to say other places you've worked, or like what? How would you react to some of those things I just spoke there?
Well, I think first of all, it's kind of an interesting point that you made yesterday about our other building, which is not, it has natural light, but it's vision glass primarily. And as a result of that, we get heavy glare and we get blinds being pulled down, we get shade umbrellas being put up, we get some of the advantages of the natural daylight is just being lost because actually my office with the blinds down right there, I just saw, and that can be really detrimental, and not an overly pleasing environment too, because even though you see blinds down half the way around there, you also see a bright glare coming in at that's actually at the north facing side of the building, well, northwest, I guess. Yeah, it is really problematic, right? Whereas when we were able to produce that softer, the result of the diffuse daylight that we get from the Solera product, we get the full benefit of the light coming through. And look, to your other question, like I think certainly I feel it when I walk into the building, but when I go into the manufacturing side, which I typically do, I'll do a round just to see folks, from time to time. But when I take strangers into the building, and you have the contrast where you can actually go from that darker end of the building where we start the tour, because that's the first stage of our production line, and we walk them up. It's like most people kind of just stop, and I don't think they really quite realize what's happening to them, but it's just an incredible experience. And then when you start to go into the dialogue to discuss it, it becomes so apparent to everybody, and they're just wowed by it. And I think it's anecdotal, but I don't think there's any question in my mind that the folks that work we call it building 2, which is a Solera enveloped building, versus building 3, which is a former grocery store building, which has next to no natural daylight in it. The atmosphere and the attitudes of the folks there are significantly different. And there's not much more you can attribute it to, except for the fact that you've produced a much more attractive and pleasing environment than in one than versus the other.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Terry, did you want to jump in on that at all? Again, you were involved with the design of the newer buildings. Maybe some thoughts into the your thought processes in the original design phase, and what the outcome has been in terms of what you see from the employees when you go there.
Yeah, well, to just add on to Steve's point, I've Steve, you're taking guests there. I've taken guests to your facilities, and I was there, I think last week, with a group that were looking at building a building and part of a national campaign to do that. And we were in the front end of 45 Drives, and we were there, and then we were talking. And we were talking, and I talked to the guy, and I said, could you imagine your products in this is a showroom? He said, absolutely. And we're just talking in general. We were there for 35 minutes, just talking. And we realized, oh, well, we should have, oh yeah, what time is it? And my point is, they were comfortable. We were comfortable talking. They liked being there. Just to Steve's point, you saw like, oh, this is kind of nice. It's really nice. Tony, I'd love for you to experience that walk sometime. Come to visit. It's really nice. But it's a testament to, sometimes I call it soak time, to be in that space where it feels nice. And if it feels nice, then you feel nice. It's really weird. I'm going to switch a little twist. I want to bring in, we talked about thermal comfort last week. Yesterday we were talking about stuff. Steve, you were talking about thermal comfort. Joe, you were talking about in the old building, Protocase building number 1, the glazing is great. You feel the shower of cold air coming down. In building number 2, after we finished that, we did the building. I did some, that was me doing some temperature measurements. And this, and Tony, sorry, this is in Celsius. That's -10. That's about 15, 16 degrees Fahrenheit. That's the outside ground. It's cold. It's cold. It's February 15th. There you go, February 15th. Outside ground temperature. Then I went, close the door. I put the gun on the insulated metal panel. It's 15.9, call it 16. That's whatever, 60, 63 degrees Fahrenheit. Then I moved up to the Solera. So the Solera wall, it's 15.3. That's an R5. So, and I've done this lots of times. You're presenting to someone, you're maybe in a boardroom, and you put your hand on the glass. There's a window there. There's a boardroom. There's a window to the outside. I said, that's cold. I said, oh yeah, that's cold because but why is that cold? Well, because it's a window and it's a window. It shouldn't be cold. Just like the insulated metal panel, that should not be cold. So an example of thermal comfort, and it's so simple. This isn't rocket science, guys, what we're doing. It's a good product on the outside envelope. It's the insulated metal panel. This is a SoleraWall with the insulated metal panel. It makes it comfortable for the people. So, and Steve, you're talking about it yesterday, but I've been in places, maybe it's a restaurant where you're at a table by a window and it's wintertime, said, everything okay? No, can we move to another table? Because it's cold there. Thermal comfort is part of the well-being of people. Imagine if someone's working there, and guess what? They're not working there tomorrow because they have a cold, or before they leave that day said, you know what, Steve, I may not be in tomorrow. I'm going to stand by that cold wall all day. I probably won't be here tomorrow because mentally they're already checked out. They're not going to be there tomorrow. So just another example of how that works on that. But anyway, experiencing that natural daylight in a building is very therapeutic.
Yeah, if you look at some of the research that's done on, like when they do surveys about the things that matter the most to occupants in terms of comfort, the top of that list is always includes natural light, views, absolutely views, and they quantify the value of a view now, right? Like a really good view versus a bad view, and they have different impacts on our sort of wellness as well. Levels of obstruction and things like that determine in view depth and the presence of wood and greenness and those sorts of things. But yeah, so back to my point of natural light, views. Thermal comfort is always up there. It's always right up there. Thermal comfort is tricky though, because you have it's kind of individually driven, right? Some people want it a little warmer, some people want it a little colder. There tends to be a little bit of a gender divide there. And there's a lot of research going on as to how you provide comfort to individuals in a situation where they're all in the same room. But they are finding solutions, and they're really simple. It's kind of cool. The other one that's interesting, it's always up near the top, is noise. Noise can be remarkably distracting. And if you think about it, the combination of IMP, which because of its insulation value also has very high levels of sound attenuation, with Solera, which has very high levels of sound attenuation, is also simultaneously dealing with outside noise issues. Like it doesn't resolve internal noise, like HVAC noise or just a loud environment, but it definitely takes away those really low frequency issues that often can be a real serious issue if you're anywhere near an urban area or a high dense area. So it's interesting that envelope, not on purpose, but is as it turns out, as a nice little bonus, is also helping with one of the other most important factors of occupant comfort. Tony, I've been rambling on and I haven't talked to you in a while. Do you have any thoughts on some of the things that have been spoken of so far?
Certainly, noise. You brought that one up. That is an area of concern, just for any building, but also, there are certain applications where it becomes even more critical. From our end, we have a whole guidebook that we offer as a free download on our website for how you achieve certain noise levels, or noise reduction levels within metal building wall systems. And so we can get everything up to as high as you need to go of a acoustic level, based on where you're at and what the requirements either from occupancy or by code are. Those are certainly factors. Environmental controls for sure. You pointed out IMPs. So IMPs, we do a lot of work to make sure that our framing systems work pretty seamlessly with IMP cladding, just because we know that all the advantages that go along with that. And a lot of our manufacturer members, they also manufacture IMPs. So it's a good marriage of products there. So all factors that go into any of our metal buildings, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, do people talk about the IMPs? I mean, clearly they talk about the natural light. Clearly they talk about the air fresh, or at least the air freshness comes into play. But the thermal comfort associated with the IMPs, Steve, are you, do you get any feedback on that, or is there anything you've noticed personally?
I'm going to answer that question very easily and say it generally is not a conversation point,
Right.
and I think that's a very good thing.
Right. Right.
It's not a thing.
It really doesn't come up because it's not an issue. I mean, normally when things like that are being talked about, it's because they're bothering somebody.
Yeah,
And
very good point.
It truly doesn't become an issue. One of the other things I was just thinking when you were talking about the IMPs, I think that's really interesting. If you look at our 45 Drives building with the red and the blue insulated metal panels with the Solera, and we have we do have some vision glass there in the entranceway. I mean, the IMPs, it doesn't look dull anymore. You can really do some really nice work and aesthetically pleasing work from the outside perspective. And especially when we talk about putting the SoleraWall in there and how those buildings at night just absolutely glow with just the internal lighting just emanating through the SoleraWall. It's just a beautiful presence when you drive by in the evening.
The beacon effect is what we tell sometimes, the Chinese lantern.
Can you explain that a little more, Terry? And maybe if you've got a picture, that would be really cool.
Well, Melissa, look at Melissa. I could tell she's smiling. I said, I'll get that.
I'm on it, guys.
But what it does, the translucents work both ways. That's Steve's building number 1 at nighttime. That's still, I think it's under construction, and it had some work lights going on there, and it glows in the dark. It really does. Because it's a translucent. The translucents do what they do. They take sunlight, diffuse it into the space. It works both ways. And as a internal light, it diffuses it outside to give that lantern effect. We've done lots of projects, not just SoleraWall, but Solera. Sometimes for the architect, that's what they wanted. They wanted that look, that crown effect on some of the projects we've done. I noticed John Clark's on here. He's an architect from Harvey Architecture. Harvey Architecture is just finishing up a project that we've done with some Solera in it. It's a car dealership. This is the fourth or fifth car dealership we've done with our Solera product in there, and encloses the showroom with Solera glassing.
I know it's not a metal building, but let's see it. I'd love to see that. It's
Give me a sec.
Yeah, we're throwing
no pressure,
us under the bus. But I've been in the couple of near Montreal, and there's one in near Vancouver. Steve, you talk about going to building number 2, the addition. It's like walking in there. It's like color correctness is important. The cars look good, and you know what? It's okay to do stuff to make people feel better, blah, 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 blah. But really, it's capitalism, and that's okay. Steve, you want people to be healthy, to be more productive, and not fewer sick days. People want to spend more time in a building there because they want to sell more cars, and that's what they do. So that's inside the space.
Trust me, it's capitalism from my perspective too.
It is. That's exactly.
It is not evil to need to make money at the end of the day.
No.
It's what keeps everybody employed and keeps families fed. It's very, very important. And making people more productive because of the way you surround them. There's nothing wrong with that.
Steve, I always say profit's not a 4-letter word.
Exactly.
It's not. You want that person to make money to buy a car there next week, right? So there's the glow there. I took this picture with my iPhone.
That's gorgeous.
It's nothing. I mean, it's a beacon. It really is. It's like I was driving there, so there it is there. Oh, there it is there. And I pulled over. Oh my gosh, that's beautiful. It's a beautiful building. It's a beacon. People their interest in the building. And they do have some vision in there. A little bit of a peekaboo, a little window box. So people psychologically, they'll want to look inside the box, and that's what they do, right? So, good work with the Harvey Architecture, and R.H. Carter was the main architect for the national program. Beautiful buildings, and we're just happy to be part of it. Happy that they got it. They understood the importance of having natural daylight in a space to make people feel better and buy some nice cars.
Tony, you must be seeing a lot of your members doing car dealerships. It's a well-suited building for that world.
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah.
The interesting thing looking at those photos, I agree. Beautiful building and a great application for the Solera panels. I have seen that style of call it the cube, which seems to be the new showroom design that a lot of the automakers are using these days. I've seen that a lot of places, and I've never seen it with a non glass, basically. I mean, it's basically a big glass cube is what I've always seen. So I think that's a good application, what you show there. You don't need to have the entire thing made out of glass. It doesn't have to. I think the idea of making it a big glass cube is, we want to show off the product. But like you said, having some visible panels there that you can see through get you the idea. And other than that, I think the end effect is I like it. I like it as well, if not better than a glass box. So.
Yeah, well, the transparent cube has, sorry, Terry, but I just got to say the transparent cube has a number of really consequential shortcomings. I mean, the one obvious one being the energy, right? When you're only dealing with, maybe an R3 center of glass in a transparent IGU, you're gonna use a lot more energy to heat and to cool that. Like the solar heat gain will be atrocious, and so your cooling costs go up, and then of course in the wintertime you're going to have a lot of heat loss because it's such a low insulation value. But on top of that, that glare is really, really uncomfortable, which is hard on your salespeople, it's hard on your staff, and it takes away from the desire for the customers to want to linger, right? When they're uncomfortable, they want to get out of there. So that was kind of the driving force. I wasn't involved with the Volvo project, but Terry, I believe those things were really at the heart of wanting to work with with Solera.
Yeah, and it's funny. It's there's a shift in philosophy. Let's see, the old school would say, I want people to drive by my dealership and be able to look in and see all these cars along the way there. And I really don't think that's happens. You're driving by, you can't see all the cars there. Oh, there's glare there. But if that has that lantern, that glow in the dark, if the people drive by, I know where that Volvo dealership is. I see it at night, it glows at the dark. You want them to come to that store. You don't want them to drive by it and look at, there's a blue one, there's a red one. What you want them to come to that store. There's a beacon there. So philosophically, acknowledgement, I know where it is. It's like McDonald's French fries or Happy Meal, whatever. Just I know what that is. I know what it is. And if I want to, I know where to go. But then when you're there, to Joe's point, you're not in a rush to leave. It's like it's dark. It's maybe they blind you down. There's a sales guy, and here comes a sales guy. Here we go. If it feels good, then you have a better attitude, perception. The whole thing is psychologically, that's selling 101. If you feel better about the selling. I was talking to someone about dealerships. They talk about the size of an office, and they wanted an office big enough when people go in to do the paperwork, they want to be big enough so they're comfortable inside that office. So we talk about, is it 10 by 10, 12 by 12, but it had to be big enough so it's comfortable for people in there to sign, do the paperwork to buy what they're going to buy. That's all part of it. But the other part of it is this building, spending more time in that building. So all of a sudden, it's bright, it's hot, it's, the sun's coming down. Honey, let's go. We'll talk about it on the way home, and we'll be back. And then they're gone. So anyway, long-winded thing, but I'm just going through that with some discussions philosophically on how the shape of building, the look of a building, the feel of building helps the bottom line, helps to sell what you want to sell.
Yeah, absolutely. Steve, recruiting is a challenge in your well, it's a challenge for absolutely everybody in every industry these days. But we live in a relatively I'll say remote area. We're certainly not rural or anything like that, but we're a little bit out of the mainstream. The fact that your buildings look so amazing at night, do you think that that's a factor at all in helping you bring people into to the company?
I do. I certainly do. I think there's two pieces to it though. I mean, the external look and feel. I think it's taken us a long time to build that reputation of being, the prime employer in our area. Um, but I think we have achieved that, and we've received recognition for that. And I think now, and we talk about the building glowing at night. Well, there's an overpass right next to our building, and we just know, we hear people saying, "Oh, I drove over the overpass the other night, and the lights were on in your building. It was just glowing. It was just beautiful." But it's recognizable now, and I think as we build our reputation, it kind of aligns and is related to the look and feel of those buildings that people see in the evening. The other thing that I think is as important, maybe even more so, is I spoke at the beginning of this about all the things that we do in terms of, providing development tools for our staff and how we provide other benefits. But I darn well know that, and it probably isn't spoken about, but the look and feel for folks when they come through the door and they come into work and they spend their 8 hours there, and then they go to other places where they see the dark and dreary. There's just that unspoken feeling that it says there's something about this place that just feels right. And when you combine that with all the other pieces that we bring to the table, I think it's a contributor to the win for us. No, I don't think. I know it's a contributor to the win for us. So yeah, so on both fronts, I think it's absolutely beneficial without a question.
Yeah, absolutely. Tony, do you hear people talking about, the building itself and the design of the building itself as a way of attracting and retaining employees? Are those conversations that come up occasionally?
It certainly comes into the conversation. Otherwise, everybody would just be doing big metal boxes, right?
Right.
Um,
Right.
if I can maybe share a couple other examples I have here just to show you from our folio series. Um,
Also, Tony, when you get a sec before you show that, if you could drop the link to wherever you found those, I'd love a link for those documents.
Yep, absolutely. It's mbmaeducation.org is the website.
Thank you.
Yep. So let's start over on this one. So this is another one of the folios, and this is actually down in Birmingham, Alabama, Firehouse Ministry Shelter. So it's a shelter for unhoused folks there in Birmingham. And so it's all metal buildings. What I wanted to show you here, we talk about the health of the human inhabitants of a building. And a couple of things that stood out here is that first off, on the design priorities here, where I highlighted, they talk about the first thing you walk into when you get to the shelter is the chapel. And so you talk about health, well, you talk about spiritual health as well, right? So that they have a design so that that's a major element of the structure there. And then this is one that you wouldn't think of, but then again, with this particular group of inhabitants, this thing I have highlighted down here is they have a room that is set up just for sanitizing of people's personal effects coming into the shelter there. And it's something that, is crucial to the health of the inhabitants of that shelter, that you feel like you can be safe from having critters, right? Going over to a different one. So this is over in LA, Los Angeles, and this is the Michelle and Barack Obama Sports Complex, another metal building there. And some interesting things here. This is a public project, so they're working on a budget. That's part of why they chose the metal building for this. As they're scrolling down through here, this is an interesting photo here. If you don't recognize the two of them, that's the Williams sisters, Venus and Serena. And actually, the park where they built this complex is where the two of them, and if you watch the movie about them, that was the park where they learned to play tennis.
Great movie.
Great movie, yeah. But a couple of interesting things. So they talk about the architectural firm. They were the only ones who proposed using a metal building. And they said basically that it's kind of similar to what I talked about with the ballet building yesterday, is that by using a metal building and the economies of doing that, they were able to make a bigger building for the same budget. So they were able to do a larger swimming pool. They were able to do 2 indoor courts instead of 1 that was originally budgeted by using a metal building there. And one of the other interesting things that they did on this project, I highlighted here, is there was an existing swimming pool that they were going to decommission on site there at the park. And rather than just fill it in, they covered it and they used it as a runoff for rainwater, which then they are able to use elsewhere. Southern California, of course, that's always a critical issue for them. And the last thing is that the whole roof is solar panels, and it's actually a net zero building, which is pretty impressive there in Southern California. And then one last one I want to show you on here is from Alamo Beer Company. This is a popular use for metal buildings that we find are these craft breweries. They're popping up all over the place. And if you're going to build a new building for a craft brewery, a metal building is usually your best bet because they are very flexible for combining retail space with production space. So this one is in San Antonio, Texas. Of interest on this one is you can see the big doors for being able to get in and out of, both for people and for equipment. Interesting set of solar panels on the roof of this building. I don't know if you recognize what they're trying to shape that as, but that's the Alamo.
Alamo, yep.
Yeah, so an homage to one of the icons there in San Antonio. And then you can see it's interesting that they used a coating on the steel panels that would immediately weather into this, making it look like it's a much older building than it is, when this thing was, I think, built in 2016, if I'm not mistaken. And you look at the surroundings around it, and it fits right into this kind of industrial surroundings in North San Antonio where they built it. But it's, again, the same thing when we're talking about making the buildings more habitable for humans. The metal building allows you to do, the big wide open areas for windows and doors for daylighting, but also they're functional in terms of a craft brewery because you need to have big openings to be able to get the massive brewing equipment in and out of there when you're changing it out. So anyway, just wanted to share a couple examples there from our folio series. And again, Melissa, it's mbmaeducation.org.
Yeah, I just dropped it in the chat also for anybody that's listening or watching that wants to take a look at that. I'm definitely putting a bookmark in that to come back to these later. Those are great. Thank you for sharing, Tony.
Sure.
So that's truly amazing. I mean, it's pretty obvious that the metal building industry is winning the war against dull buildings, because everything that we've seen from you, Tony, is just anything but a dull building. And I have to take a moment to say, I think I got a couple of minutes left. I have to take a moment to say that we're starting to do a lot of business with Butler dealers. Absolutely love Butler. We're starting to do business with Nucor dealers, and so it's lovely to see the industry that people would have looked at as being cheap is one of the industries that's truly embracing this need for higher valued buildings, more beautiful buildings, healthier buildings, and greener buildings, more sustainable buildings as well. So hats off to you guys, Tony. It's wonderful to see. Is there anything anybody would like to say before Melissa wraps up, or do I just turn it over to Melissa?
I just a comment, if you don't mind. Metal buildings, Tony, you talked about it today in previous sessions. The thing, because they're cheap. They're not cheap. They're affordable. And what I've seen, some of the portfolios showed, Tony, and the ones we've seen that Steve has built, these are beautiful buildings. They're beautiful buildings, and they're affordable. They're not cheap. They're affordable. And I just like the diversity, Tony, of some of the ones you show that, like you talked about the something coming up, and of these 10 buildings, which one is a metal building?
Right.
And they all are, because that's where it's going, and they are affordable. Like the 45 Drives is a beautiful building, and it didn't cost a lot of money to do that. It's a little bit of forethought, a little bit of planning. That's it, and it's not rocket science, or someone would say rocket appliances, but it's achievable. We're not pie in the sky stuff. I think that's a biggest takeaway from this.
Yeah, I think if I just frame up my thoughts on this at the end of this, though, next building for us, there won't even be a consideration of how we're going to envelope that building. It will definitely be insulated metal panels with plenty of naturally daylighted material in there, i.e. SoleraWall. And I wouldn't even consider anything else at this stage of the game. It just makes so much sense.
Advanced Glazings is also looking at an expansion as well, and it will also be a metal building. It'll be adjacent to our existing building here. So we're all fans here. We're all fans. Melissa, do you want to wrap it up?
Yes, fantastic episode. This has been very educational for me. All 4 episodes have been extremely educational, but it's been so great to put faces to these voices that I've heard on the Better Buildings for Human podcast. Almost all of our guest panelists have been previous guests on the podcast. And also thank you so much for Steve. I know it's past your nap time. And Terry, great host, and Joe Manchesky, obviously great host. He's our host extraordinaire over here. So thank you guys so much for joining us for the War on Dull Buildings. This will definitely not be the last summit, and we're looking forward to the next one. So thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Melissa. Thanks,
Thank
Tony.
you.
Thanks, Steve.
Take care, everybody.
See you later.